So in this fourth clip about managing humidity in a Brinsea machine, we'll be looking at setting up the pump on an Octagon 20 Advance. Note that you can either purchase an Octagon 20 Advance EX, which comes as a combination of the incubator and the humidity pump, or you can purchase a pump separately at some stage later in order to upgrade an existing Octagon 20 Advance to an Octagon 20 Advance EX. It is, however, more economical to purchase the Advance EX combination initially. So what we get is a kit that arrives in a box like this. So what we're going to do is I've just opened this, we're going to explore what's inside our humidity pump kit so that you can see on an Octagon 20 what you get. Okay, so we will get some instructions, well worth reading alongside any video like this that you use. For the moment we'll put those to one side. We'll get a nicely packed lid and reservoir. So we'll release those by taking the holding box out. There we go. There's our pump head, and there's the base. So let's take these out of their plastic bags. Evaporating cards we'll get, and we should get 10 evaporating cards. And they've been pre-cut to size. This is our silicone tubing. So we've got a roll of silicone tubing here, which we use both to replace our existing tubing on top of the pump here, to connect from the pump down into the reservoir, and to connect from the pump into our machine. So we'll get 3 meters of that silicone tubing, and that's a consumable. You can reorder it as you need it, code 14.11. In this little bag we've got a 13 centimeter long piece of rigid tubing. Okay, and this is the piece that will go into the incubator and onto our evaporating card here. We also have 2, we call them evaporating pad clips, and they secure our evaporating pad to the underside of the incubator lid. So when you buy the Octagon 20 Advance EX, i.e. with the pump kit, you get the added benefit of some couple of extra egg dividers, tray dividers, so that if you are hatching smaller, more precious eggs, if you like, than your standard hen eggs, which is sometimes why people buy the more advanced version with the pump, because humidity becomes more critical. So you get an extra couple of these for smaller eggs. And because people are often hatching more delicate eggs, we also supply them with 8 of these foam cushions for the wire dividers. So you now got 8 dividers, and we add the cushions into the middle of the dividers like this to create a cushioned divider. Okay. We also supply a foam cushion for lining the base of the egg basket. So to demonstrate, there's my egg basket, and that foam cushion sits in the base, and my egg dividers with the foam inserts can now fit into that tray. So if we're hatching, for example, very small eggs, we can protect them with the foam inserts. So that's those. What you'll notice on the inside of the pump lid is a serial number, and I don't know if you can see that very clearly, but yeah, maybe now. That serial number is the number, particularly if you're buying your pump separately. You need to go to the website, and to register your pump, it's an individual number, register that pump for your 3-year warranty on the pump. Now, for that reason, it's also worth making sure you hold on to the boxes, because if ever you want to send one of our products back, it's always best to send it back in the original box, which was deliberately designed for that item and is much more likely to protect it in transit. Now, talking of the box, you also have a serial number at the end of the box, which is the same as the one on the pump. So either of those numbers you need to register on our website to qualify for your 3-year warranty on these pumps. So the question is, where do I plug my pump into? So my lid sits on top of the reservoir. I need an output socket from my incubator to my pump so that my incubator can tell my pump what to do. Now, that is in the lid of my incubator, and it's just next to there's the lid of my incubator, and it sits just next to the input, the electric input for the machine, the mains input. So if I take my screwdriver and I undo the top, the little cap there that protects the electrical sockets. Now, I don't know if you'll see this, but hopefully you will. But beside my mains input here, there is a little socket here into which is the output socket. I plug in my pump. It's quite a stiff fit. Just plug that in. There we go. That's in, and it's as simple as that. Obviously, while I'm setting up the pump, I don't have my incubator turned on. I'll make sure it's all turned off. So what do I do next? Well, from my silicon tubing, of my 3 meters silicon tubing, I need to cut a suitable length so that I can connect my pump to my incubator. So we recommend about 50 centimeters, half a meter. So let's just say about that much. Cut a piece like that. There we go. So that's my piece of silicon tubing that's going to connect the pump to the incubator. I need to fit my piece of rigid plastic tube to the end of my silicon tubing, and I'm going to overlap the silicon tubing over the top of the rigid plastic tube by about 12 millimeters, just over a centimeter. Just push that on. It will slide on. It's a little bit stiff, but it will slide on. Okay, and I need a decent overlap. Not easy when you've got slightly warm fingers it slides. Anyway, that's about it. Okay, so when we've overlapped that by about a centimetre here, as I've done here, just over a centimetre, we can position this into the lid of the incubator. Now, before we do that, what we ought to do is to make sure we place our cap back over the electrics without trapping any of the wires and fixing that lid back down again with a little screw that we've got, which can drop out if it's slightly magnetized, or if the screwdriver is magnetized. There we are. So just fix that back in, making sure we don't trap any of these wires, just to protect the electrics. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to thread this through a little hole in the lid of the Octagon 20 for the humidity pump, and you can see that the hole is there, and there's a couple of water droplet signs which tell you that this is the right hole to thread our rigid tubing through. So we're going to thread that through the top of the lid, but we're also going to thread it through the hole, little square hole that appears here as well. So I've got to thread the tubing up into here. It's going to be tricky. I don't know if you can see this. I've got the tubing coming through here. It'll take you a little bit of messing around, I imagine, to get it to actually go into the hole you want it to go to, but fiddling around, you will eventually, I imagine, get it to do what you want it to do. And if you can see that, it's coming through now. Got it. There we go. Okie dokie. That is now through. Okay, so I've finally got that piece of tube to come out through that little hole in the base. So what we do now is we attach the evaporating card to the base, because the water is going to feed through that tube and into the evaporating card. I don't know if you can see that from there. So I need a piece of evaporating card, and this has been pre-cut. I'm going to fold the evaporating card lengthwise down the middle, like this. And that evaporating card is going to sit on these little triangular moldings here coming out of the base. And the tube is going to feed water into the evaporating card. So I'm going to position my evaporating card over the top of the little molding pieces, and to fix that I'm going to need the help of these little yellow clips that we mentioned before. So beside each of them of the little moldings there is a hole. I imagine you can see that hole just beside these, and these little clips, fishbone shaped, go in and they stay there, and they will hold the evaporating card in place. So let's do that quickly. So I'll put one piece of evaporating card here. There we go. Please see the clip over the top of the evaporating card here. And that's now holding that in place. And the tubing is feeding and touching the edge of the evaporating card. There we go. So that's that bit sorted. So on the Octagon 20, we've talked about the fact that the rigid plastic tube needs to go through the little hole next to the water drop symbols, which you can see here. That's the Octagon 20. On the Octagon 40, it's just very slightly different, because we have another hole, which is here, just close to the black lid, black top of the incubator. And on the Octagon 40, we put the rigid tube through that hole like this, it goes through at an angle, and it just keeps on going, feeding through there. And then on the base, if we turn the lid over, what we'll see is the Octagon 40 has 3 moulded clips. So whereas with the Octagon 20, we add little yellow clips to hold the evaporating card, on the Octagon 40, those clips are already moulded into the machine. So all we do, having introduced that rigid plastic tube which is attached to our pump, is to take our evaporating card, fold it down the middle in the same way we do with the Octagon 20, and introduce that evaporating card into the machine, so that one side fits on one side of the rigid tube and the other side fits on the other side of the rigid tube, so that the rigid tube comes down between the two sides of the evaporating block. So what you'll find when you've got it in properly is that the evaporating block sits in a V shape in the lid like this. Let's see if I can turn it around to show you that at an angle. There we go. So that is being held in a V-shaped position by the little V-shaped mouldings here. And the rigid plastic tubing, as you can see here, is feeding down into the evaporating card. So just making contact with the evaporating card. So as the pump is feeding water through this silicone tube, it is dripping into the evaporating card, making that moist. And it's as simple as that to set up the evaporating card in the Octagon 40, along with this piece of rigid tubing, which then connects to your pump. Otherwise, it's no different to the Octagon 20. So now to the pump itself. So I've got a piece of tubing that needs to link to the pump. The best way to do that is to put the pump itself in front of you with the little bung facing you, and attach the piece of tubing, silicone tubing, to the little nipple here on the left hand side, and that just goes over just as we've done with the rigid tube. That just fits over. A bit of a squash to get it on, but it will go on like so. Okay, and that piece will, when you get the pump, that'll always be set up on the pump to start with, this piece of 140mm tubing here. That 140mm tubing, for any of the pumps that we use, that 140mm piece of tubing needs to be replaced relatively frequently, certainly at the start of each season and probably after every 2 or 3 hatchings. So it's a consumable piece. Measure it out, make sure you get the right length, because what happens is that as it wraps around this, what we call the capstan head here, if you leave it there for any length of time, the silicone tubing will start to stick. It will also stretch, so it won't be the 140mm anymore, and it can split as well. So it does need replacing fairly frequently. Okay, next thing then, so we've attached this here. We've got a piece of tubing on the other end here, which is already in there, but again, if need to, you can replace this, but it won't really need replacing very often, this at all. And that fits down through a little hole at the edge, the side of the right hand side of the pump, and that fits into the reservoir where you have the water, and you can feed the water in by removing the little bung and putting water in there. Now, the important point at this point is to remember that this tubing here needs to be fitted around the capstan head in a particular way. So going with the bung facing you, going from left to right, you go round in an anti-clockwise direction around the capstan head and down into the reservoir, making sure not to pinch the tubing so that water can pass freely through it. And it's as simple as that. So we've got to the point now where all we need to do is to fill the pump with water. So if we take the bung out and get ourselves a jug of water, we can top that up. And we don't want to overfill it. We don't want to go beyond the top of the plastic see-through reservoir. There we are, so that'll do to start with. I can always top it up later. Put the bung back in. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I can put my lid on my machine. I have it all connected up. That's the silicone tubing. That's my connector from the incubator back out to my pump, and I can now turn the machine on and you'll hear the machine kick into life. There it goes. So what I would need to do now, having the machine having started, is I'd need to wait. It's the wrong way around, but I'd need to wait until the machine has stabilized. So it needs to come up to temperature, and when it's come up to temperature, I can then adjust my humidity on it. So I'm going to leave this for a few seconds. Sorry, I'm going to leave this. I'm not going to leave it for a few seconds. I'm going to leave it for a while now to come up to temperature, and then we're going to plug in the humidity that we want that machine to work to. At the moment, it'll be set at 20%, which is the factory setting for the default setting for the humidity, and I want to set it to 40% to incubate some eggs. Okay, so we've now left this for a good hour to get up to temperature and stabilize a little bit. So let's show you where we're now at with this machine. So hopefully you can see that the temperature is at 37.5, 37.6, rotating around 37.5 as it should be, and the humidity is being indicated as 32%. Now we want that machine up at 40% humidity. That's what we want it to work. Well, that's what I want it to work to. So what I've got to do now is to go into the menu and change the humidity setting on it. And in order to do that, I need to press the minus and the plus key down together. Now, if you don't get them down together, it won't take you in. So sometimes it takes a little bit of fiddling to get in, but it is fine. Let's have a go. There we are. So it's taken me straight in there to the first setting by pressing unlocking the menu. I go straight into temperature, and that is the temperature setting. If I want to go in and change things around the temperature, I would OK that, but I don't. I want to move on to humidity because that's the one I'm interested in. So I'm going to press the plus key down to take me on to the next setting. Didn't press it down properly. There we are. That's taken me to my next setting, which is relative humidity, which I do want to look at. I want to enter into that setting and I want to see what it's set at now. So I'm going to press OK on that to go into that setting. And there we are. It tells me that it's relative humidity 20%. Yeah, and that I can only set the humidity when I'm using the pump. So with the pump, I can now add humidity to that. So I'm going to take that now up to 40%. There we are. So I'm going to go for 40%. What you're hearing is the pump kicking in. So the pump is now saying, okay, it's not at 40%. I need now to start bringing humidity up to 40%. However, I need to OK this. I need to go down through until I get to the save menu. Whoops, gone past it. Save menu. And in order to save the setting in humidity, I must press the OK on save. So let's press the OK on save. It takes me out, back to the standard control display, and I can see my temperature stood at 37. My humidity has now kicked in. I can hear the machine whirring, and it's going to move me up slowly to 40%. And it'll take 24 hours to stabilize, but that is where it is now heading because I have set it to work to 40% humidity. It is currently at 32%. A couple of things. The pump will only kick in if the humidity is below the target humidity set in the control panel. So that pump is kicking in now, and you can see it hopefully turning there. You see that turning, that capstan head? That is kicked in because the humidity is below the target humidity I've set up, and it's slowly working away, and eventually it'll be drawing water through. In fact, you can see the water coming through there. You might be able to see that water coming through there now. If I come up close, can you see the water working its way, inching its way along now through the pump, over the pump head there, and it'll work its way down onto the evaporating card eventually, and it will eventually stabilize at 40% humidity. But you need to give it 24 hours to do so. Now you'll find that the humidity will fluctuate slightly when it's stabilized 1 or 2% around the target humidity that you've set. The other thing to note is that the pump will only operate if the incubator is operating above the minimum temperature alarm setting on the machine. And the reason it does that is to prevent the pump from adding too much water if, for example, the lid has been taken off, or if, for example, you're using the cooling. So the pump will only operate if you're close to the target temperature. One final thing is that just looking at the humidity setting on that machine, you can see that next to the temperature you've got a flashing asterisk there, and when it's flashing like that, it is because the temperature is up to its target level. It's pulsating because the temperature is on its target level. With the humidity, that asterisk is not flashing, and it won't flash until it gets to its target level. When it's up and about its target level, it will start to pulsate. And it's as easy as that, really.